And we're back at it.
Who do we have with us, Nathan?
Nobody important at the moment.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'm hearing a lot of echo. Ah, 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 ah. What a way to start off a podcast. We have the wives in with us today. Wives, how are you?
Great. I'm good too.
So we are fresh off of a happening weekend. 3 people in this booth at the moment. We were off last week, so this is our first podcast back since that event. And since that event, like I said, with there being 3 of us, we're going to talk a little bit about the happening today, kind of what all went on there, as much as what we can delve into and divulge. And we'll just see where the Spirit takes us from there. So we have with us my wife, Brooklyn. Brooklyn, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you serve? What part of the church? Blah, 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 blah.
I serve in the kids K through 5 mainly, and I help sometimes with the youth Wednesday nights. So
And then Caitlin, a little bit about you. Where do you serve?
I am part of the worship team, and I am also part of the hospitality team. And I don't like, I am, I help with the young adult group. I don't like to say I'm leading it, or help lead it, but I facilitate activities.
she does phenomenal.
Thanks.
She's the goat.
So I think like every week we'll start out getting a little bit of your guys' testimony and stuff like that, and then we'll circle around to talking about happening a little bit, like Nathan said, and then just see where we go from there and what time allows us to talk about. So who wants to go first? Okay.
So the first portion of our podcast, me and Zach like to just kind of get a feeling. So if it's kind of difficult sometimes with just one person to kind of get the ball rolling. So um, the funny thing is, the first 2 or 3 I'm sorry, that echoing in the headphones is really getting to me. The first 2 podcasts that we did, it was a mixture of just vocal and getting things nice and tidied up that way. And so we've never had 4 people in the booth. This is going to be fun. So, Zach, if you want to ask your wife questions, and then I'll ask my wife questions. Bada bang, bada boom. Caitlin?
So excuse me. And I was fine until we started talking, and then all of a sudden I got something stuck in my throat. Uh, so, Caitlin, when was your first experience with God? Like, when did you realize that, you know, being a Christian was who you wanted to be? And give us a little bit of your testimony.
I am blessed to be able to say that I grew up in church. I My parents made sure that I um, was there on Sundays, and um, I would say it was important to them for me to be, my brother and I, to be there. Um, when we were or when we were younger, my parents really trusted our church family, and I would say that they were um, parents that would drop us off at Sunday school and then pick us up after church. Um, and so um, it was interesting. Like they would come to, like, if we had a performance or that kind of thing. They wanted to make sure we were there. And then when we got into high school, I would say my parents started coming with us on a weekly basis, which is really cool to be able to spend that time with them. and see that it was important to them as well. Um, my uh, my parents baptized me as a baby, um, but then um, I would say like 3 or 4 years ago, I actually decided to be rebaptized for my own self to proclaim that. But I've always been. It's one of those times where like you can't think of a time where you didn't have God. But I would say in high school, you make, at least I make that decision, like, where do I want to spend my time? I want to spend my time with people that are going to lead me in the right ways. And so I would make sure that I would go to youth, and I would make sure that I would say yes to the opportunities that there would be worship or God would be spoken about.
I would like to touch on something just a second. You made the comment about how you got rebaptized because you just felt it was time for you. A lot of people don't, a lot of people, if you go to get baptized or you go to get saved, I think sometimes, more often than not, you feel peer pressured, like you don't really understand what a baptism is, but hey, this is something I need to do, so I'm going to do it. And as a kid, sometimes you do that, and you grow up and you forget the importance of what the baptism stands for. And I like how you said that you redid that because you felt that it was something you wanted to do. You didn't. It wasn't somebody that pressured you. It was something that you felt like God was telling you, and you felt comfortable with. I know I've been baptized. I know your power. I know your grace. This is just something I'm doing for me. This is my um, public display to you that I am doing this for you, and that's something that I just wanted to touch on real quick because I think a lot of people, they don't really understand. If they don't understand what a baptism is for, yes, you do walk in front sometimes in church whenever there's an altar call. You walk in front of people and you go to the altar, you ask Christ. But there's times where there are people sitting there and they ask Christ in the seat, and they ask Christ to start moving in their life. And so that's not necessarily a public, but you've accepted Christ as your Savior. So that next step is the water baptism. The water baptism is showing people, hey, I believe in my God. This is what, He's washed away everything. And so I just wanted to touch on that. Sorry, I didn't mean to stop, but I just really like how you added that part of it in there, that you got rebaptized because you just felt that it was necessary.
And I would encourage anyone who's having that question, because for a while I second guessed it because I was like, but I'm serving in the church, so how are people going to look at, like, see me, like, I've been serving and now I'm getting baptized, like, what does that, how does that look? And I just want to encourage people, like, that it's your journey, so that's your step and that's your choice to make. And just to, like, don't be afraid to step out in that, because you don't, I mean, it's important for you to show, like, whose you are. And so, yeah.
So you were saying that you got rebaptized. Your mom and dad were started coming to church in high school. Before I interrupted, you were started at the spot where high school. You said so high school. So we'll start at the high school journey where Caitlin was talking about her relationship with Christ.
So I grew up in the Methodist Church, and I going to church, I knew God was there. But I don't know, it was just kind of an interesting, I didn't feel like it was, we were outwardly talking about him, like what he was doing on a daily basis in people's lives. So actually, I went to Happening when I was a freshman in high school, and it was there that I, like, saw, like, what worship really was. I'm a pro hymn person. I think there's a place for that, but doesn't always lead to an outwardly, I don't know, just it could be a little stuffy sometimes. And so I didn't really know, or I hadn't seen that on a weekly in and out basis. And so just to be able to see what worship really was and being able to just sing your heart out and really like let God know and that you're thankful for him, and that praise and worship is just really, I don't know, that really got to me. So I think that was really important for me to be able to come back to my week to week, my day to day, and just realize like I don't have to, it's not, it is a personal relationship, but also you have to share what God's doing in your life so that people know like how good he is if they aren't experiencing that at that moment. I went through high school. I graduated. I went to college. I do occupational therapy in the schools. And when I was in school, I went to Arizona where some of my family lives, and I did my clinicals there. And my cousin was on maternity leave, and she asked if I would do her maternity leave for OT. So me being, well, I wouldn't say fresh out of, or young out of college because it took me 7 years, but that's besides the point. God had a new plan, his own plan than mine. But I went there and I was like, okay, I'm going to spend 2 months here, help out my cousin, spend time with my family, and all that. And when I got there, I emailed where I did my clinicals, and I said, hey, I'm out here for a couple months. Do you have any like PRN work that you have? Because I only am working 2 days a week. And they offered me a full-time position there. And so my plan was to be out there for 2 months, and I ended up staying there for 3 years. God just opened a door, and I felt like peace about it, and I felt like he was just calling me to step out because I'm definitely like homebody, be at home, with my family, and I was going to be with my family anyway, but it was definitely, I had to trust. And I started going to a church with my cousin out there, and God was just like revealing a lot of things to me. I started just singing on the worship team there and with the young adult group, and just God blessed me with so many different relationships. He blessed me in my work. And then in 6 years ago, while I was still living there, my dad got sick. And, well, let's be honest, he was sick the whole time, a while, but because I was out there, I didn't get to notice the day-to-day. So my brother and my mom called and said that they were going to take my dad to the hospital, and that just to let me know what was going on. And I just felt God say, you need to go home. And so I flew home on a Sunday morning, and I got to spend a week with my dad. And by the time I left, he wasn't really talking anymore. And they said that the cancer had spread to all the parts of his body, basically. And they said that treatment wouldn't be helpful. So I made the decision to go back to Arizona because my mom and I were talking, and she was like, your dad wouldn't want you to be here just watching him like this. And I said, yeah, you're right. So I went back home, at that time it was my home, to Arizona. And then so I was back on Sunday, and that next Thursday my dad passed away. And I had this, like, God was protecting me through this whole time because I got, in that last year of his life, I got to come home 3 different times for like weeks at a time, which like who does that in their like new job, like your boss is probably like, sorry, you should probably be working instead of taking these times off. But God knew that I needed that time with him. And yeah, so God was in it, even though at the moment I was like not feeling it. So I came home and we celebrated my dad's life. And for me, I had to push in, because if I just sat at home, it would have been a bad situation. So I had to push in. And that's what's so awesome about community, is that like God puts people in your lives to support you and to be the hope that you need when you can't do it for yourself. That can remind you of who God is. And I think that God blessed me with that back in Arizona. And then he opened an opportunity to come back home. And at that time, it would have been a lot easier to stay in Arizona than it would have been to move home, because I had made relationships. I had formed, I had been doing really well with like serving there. And so I just prayed about it, and I had people that I trusted to pray about it, that wouldn't tell me. I mean, they would tell me, yeah, like they wanted me to stay, but they would actually like, God would lead them in what to tell me. And I trusted, and I moved back home. And it was a lot different with my dad not being here. So I had to find the new normal. And like my friends changed in the 3 years I was gone. And so just finding new, I don't know, God his hand was in it. He like prepared my heart, prepared people's heart that were here. And yeah, God's in it all. And I mean, even the fact of Jamie and I went to the same college in the same program. She was just the year ahead of me. And so when I came home, I went back to the Methodist church, and I was like, okay, this is not for me anymore. I can't be here. I mean, I can be here, but it's not, I need something new. I need God grew me, and I need something more. And I saw Jamie posted something about Venture Church, and so I went and tried it one Sunday, and the rest is kind of history, like in that aspect of starting to serve and go, and joined a home or oh my gosh, a small group, and then made relationships there that just kept building. And yeah, then home church is here, and I love all my people.
So the one thing that we do have to do, unfortunately, is the main reason that I wanted to start this podcast is go back to the painful moments, so that way the people that are here and listening, they have to understand that it's not all sunshine and roses. And a lot of people think that the hardest moment of a Christian is the moment that you stand in front of everybody and say, Jesus, I accept you. A lot of people, whenever you're not a Christian, that's a big leap, because you're nervous and all that stuff. That's one of the most easiest things about being a Christian, because once you accept him, there's an enemy that wants to make sure that you don't get the blessings that he rains down. So whenever we talk about something like that, one of two things can happen. You can let it scar you, and you can harden your heart, and you can blame God and say, why was it him? Why was it him? Why does this, and this, and this? But you didn't. You just made the comment that God was with you. You knew that God was with you. You accepted God was with you. And no matter what happened, you never took your focus off of him. You knew the whole time. And that's a big part, because people seem to think that when you go through a bad time, it's because you're a bad Christian, and that's not the case. things are going to happen in your life, and something like that, as uncomfortable as it is, to sit and talk about losing somebody that close. I mean, that's a father. What is a piece of advice for somebody who, A, they've just lost somebody, or B, they lost somebody a long time ago, but they're leaving that person as a sort of tumor and a cancer to build up and a hatred to build up, instead of letting it go, instead of letting God take that. People hold on to this stuff and they want to blame God. What is a piece of advice that you would give somebody who's holding on to the death of a loved one, and they say it's okay, and they say they're fine, and they say they've let it go, but they haven't truly let it go? What helped you really truly let it go?
I think, honestly, it's always in the back of your mind, and so you want to remember those good times. I think that's one of the things is like, don't be afraid to talk about it. Like, don't be afraid to talk about those good times. Like, don't don't forget them. I think that's one of the things, like, when something happens, my mom and I, or Jacob and I, will just, like, remember when Dad, did this, or, like, just bringing them up in conversations, like, that's bringing, like, good memories. And then also just, like, remember, like, at least for us, like, our dad would not want us to sit back and just let everyone else, like, their lives move on. Like, he would want us to, be happy. And one of the biggest, or not biggest fears, but one of my, like, when Zach and I met and we got married, like, that was, like, I wanted to get married to him, but in the back I was like, but my dad is missing all these, like, great things that are happening. And but I was just reminded, like, he's there, and Jacob sounds just like him, and, like, like, things that he says remind me of him. And so, like, even in all those, like, the times where you're like, I wish you were here, like, he's protected, like, God's protected you in that, and that he's going to give you, at least I really feel like he's going to give you something that will be a positive reminder versus that negative piece. And that's still, I mean, a daily struggle, but
And it's like, it's difficult to see it this way, but, like, what was intended for bad turns out good. And I hate, it's difficult to bring up. It's easy for me to ask you that question because it wasn't me that went through it. It's hard for you to say it. But what people have to realize is whenever it comes to a pain, whenever it comes to a hurt, it doesn't matter how the situation occurs and how it ends and how everything works out. We're so much creatures of wanting to know why, wanting to know how. And whenever something like that happens, you tend to put yourself in a pit. You tend to separate yourself from people. The best thing that you can do is find people. And there's no better place than home church, I think, for that, because my wife can attest, that's what we were looking for. We needed a family. We needed something, and there has been, I feel like, so many, I just want to say this, I feel like the last probably 10 years have been very difficult for me. And I've lost family, I've lost friends, and whenever we went to the happening, I looked around and I seen Jacob and Brittany and Kaylin, you, Caitlin, me and Zach, Marcy in the kitchen, and I would say 10 years ago, you would have been very fortunate to get me to go to Aurora. You would have been very fortunate to get me to go to a church event in Aurora. You would have been very hard pressed to get me to stay 3 days at a church in Aurora with a bunch of kids on 2 hours of sleep. But I seen the
Let alone
love.
sleeping on an air mattress.
Yeah. That was the fun part, though. I love sleeping on air mattresses. um, but the devil took so much away from me, and I let him take it. And whenever I was in that moment of tired, and I looked around and I seen you guys, and I seen the love and the devotion that you guys had for those kids and for the happening, which we'll get to more in detail. But I realized that that was family. This is family now. And what was taken away from me and what was intended for bad is sitting down and doing stuff like this. I can't thank God enough. And to see somebody like you, to hear your story, and to see you still smile, to see you still wanting to help, and to see somebody still have a passion for the Lord, even though something like that happens, it's visible proof that what is intended to harm does nothing but good. I see Marcy whenever she's around you and Jacob. I see Marcy when she's in here. She's smiling. She's hanging out with us at the young adults nights. I mean, Marcy's like mom, and to all of us. So you have a young adults event and you have Marcy coming and everybody's talking to Marcy like she's 26, 20, and you hear Marcy talking to everybody like they're her kids. And if it's not home church, you find a church and seep in the people. Don't look for things. Don't look for people who are wearing fancy jewelry. Look for the ones who are wearing a smile the first time you walk through the door. And those are the ones that from Clayton to whenever I went over to your guys' house for the first young adults event, just welcoming arms. And so people want to think that when something like this happens, they go, okay, well, that was my father. I'm going to harden my heart. I don't want to love anymore. I'll love to an extent, but I don't want to get hurt like this again. They fear that. And the problem is whenever you fear something like that, the devil's got a stronghold on it. So now you're never going to love. And the scripture tells us that's one of the main things Jesus wants us to do, love one another. And if that part of your life is kind of caged and cooped up, you're not going to be able to fully express it. And if for those of you that don't interact with Caitlin on a daily basis, for those of you that don't get to see Caitlin because you're online viewers, she's always got a smile on her face. She's always willing to help. How many, if you were to just average, because you come in here for the women's meeting, I know like the Flourish meetings, you're usually here before I am on Tuesday whenever we're setting up for a practice. Let's see, you're generally here sometimes on a Wednesday night whenever we come in to do youth, you're getting ready to leave. How, as somebody who kind of is different places, like so many of the other people that we've had on this podcast, they serve in so many other areas of the church. What amount of time, how many times a week would you say you're up here at the church?
If I'm serving on a Sunday, I'm here at least twice. We just started back our women's ministry meetings, so a third depending on that week. But yeah, I mean, and then we usually have a young adult activity, hopefully twice a month. It's not always at church, but at our house, or if we're going to lunch or that kind of thing. So I would say twice a week at average.
And again, I'm not asking people to say this so they can brag about it, but it just gives people an understanding of if you are going to serve and you are going to serve. Maybe it is just one area, but especially if you're going to serve in multiple areas, it gives them a good idea of kind of what road is ahead, what they can expect, so that way they're not here and then they get disheartened and they're, I'm just here all the time, I feel like I never get to. So it's one of those things that I like to make people aware of whenever we do have somebody that serves here. is they understand the process. They understand because um, sometimes, like whenever, I mean, Zach can protest to this. Whenever you walk back here in the media booth, there's a lot of different buttons. So it's not like you learn everything, right off of the bat. It takes a minute to get everything figured out and the lay of the land. So whenever you first start, you're like, oh, wow, this is a lot. Well, JB's just so naturally good at what he does. It took him a minute, for me anyways, to be like, oh, this kid, like, he's not, he didn't come back here because he's a tech wizard. He just, was looking for a place to serve. So if I would have known going into it what it was, maybe it would have helped, maybe it wouldn't. Here I am, and I still love every bit of it. So I'm not complaining, but it just gives people that are listening an idea of kind of what to expect whenever, and not only that, but to hopefully get a little bit more respect and understanding for the position that you do play. You're not just somebody that walks in and walks out. You do devote your time. So
To circle back around to you being able to dive into your community after your dad passed, I was just a little bit of my background. I did not dive in. I hid and ran away and stayed in my room. Depression took over really, really hard. Luckily, I got to move to Nashville for a little bit, get my mind right, and luckily my dad and my stepmom and my little brother helped a lot with that, and so did my dog, which sounds crazy enough, but I firmly believe if God can't work through people, he'll definitely work through animals. So it was 100% God working through, Max saving my life, because I got very, very depressed and at one point a little bit suicidal and stuff like that. So luckily moved to Nashville, like I said, and then was able to get my mind right, came back home, and, I think within 3 weeks of moving back home, I met Caitlin. So, and the rest is history. Like she said, she did get baptized, 4 years ago now? And we had the great chance and opportunity to do that together. So that was really, really cool. So, but enough of that. So, before I start crying too. So,
is there anything else? We're about 32 minutes in. Anything else that you would like to? Anything you'd like to add before we get started on what Happening is all about?
I just find your people and push into them and let them support you. I think I have learned throughout the years that actually your little Devo on Wednesday night this month, I was like, he's stepping on my toes without knowing he's stepping on my toes. But Nathan just spoke a word of that God's for everyone. And I feel like for me, sometimes I'm like, my problems aren't as bad as everyone else's. Like they let them take God. And I'm like, no, God's big enough for all of us. So I think just a reminder that yes, you can be an encouragement for other people, but let them be an encouragement for you. Don't be afraid to share your struggles because one, that's accountability for if there's something you're struggling with that you need help with. But two, just so we're called to help each other. So don't forget that.
Brooklyn, do you have any questions for Caitlin?
I don't have any questions, but I love her, and I thank you for all you do all the time. You serve in so many areas, and you can't not see her and not want to hug her. I mean, she's one of the best huggers, too. So I just love you guys, and I'm super thankful for you guys in our lives.
We love you guys, too.
So we started off the podcast and just mentioned the Happening. It was definitely a very eye-opening experience. It was so much fun. Me and Zach, I think I've never been so excited on a trip to a church because we had Whataburger and then Andy's right afterwards, and they were right next to each other in Republic, and so that's how the weekend started off. But for Caitlin, it was not as grandiose as the two men that came rolling in at about 6 o'clock. So, Caitlin, from your perspective, I know as somebody who was bringing, who through the years have probably been and brought a lot of people to the happening, you would also know a lot more in that aspect. But you've also served a lot of happenings as well. So, just give us a little insight of what a server can kind of expect on something like the happening. What does your planning and such, what all do you have to go through before one of these officially even starts?
And what is happening for those that don't know?
So happening is a high school ministry. A candidate can go through if they're entering into freshman year. So 8th graders in August will be able to go through because they're going to be a freshman.
And for those of you who are like me and aren't very intelligent, whenever she talks about a candidate. A candidate is basically, this is their first year. So they're basically the new kids on the block. So whenever she's going through and explaining it took me a minute to figure out what a candidate was. I was like, did they win a prize or something like what? But a candidate is somebody who this is their first year, or this is the first year. They may not be a freshman, but because like me, even though I was a leader, technically I was a candidate. It was my first year, so. But sorry to interrupt, but that was one of the things I was like a candidate. Whenever they were saying I was like, what'd they win? Like, I was waiting for them. So that's what a candidate is. But back to the happening.
So it's a youth retreat that happens 3 times a year, usually the end of July, first weekend of August, November, right before Thanksgiving, and then the first weekend in March. I'm actually on the board of happening, and so we meet and we discuss like how if there's anything that we need to change to make it run smoother, that kind of thing. But it's student led, so there's adults there for each team, but the majority of the talks that go on are by students. And it's really cool because students are mentoring other students. They have family group time. God just works through the weekend, and the way we call it is like church camp week in 48 hours. So there's a lot going on, a lot happening. So if you're serving, you're there to serve so that God's love can shine into those candidates. You, like Nathan said, you don't sleep a lot. You you clean a lot of bathrooms. We serve a lot of food, cut a lot of carrots, but if you go through, you'll find out why. So yeah, there's just a lot of praying too that goes on. Once we know a candidate is signed up, we pray for them. So there's always someone praying, constantly praying while we're there at the weekend as well. So we can't do it without prayer and God. So
I do have to say that there's something about, I remember being a kid in youth church and stuff, and I went to James River as like a teen, so we had our own student center and everything, and it was just a complete show. The lights and everything, it was amazing. The one thing that was, though, like it was kind of overwhelming for me, so I never really paid attention during worship and stuff like that. At the happening, it was Saturday night, and we were wore out. It was midnight, I'm wore out, I'm getting a little cranky. Yeah, I'm getting a little cranky, and I looked up, and I seen 85, 86 students, and at James River, they had slides. Here at home church, we had slides. It's been forever since I've seen a clear projector with music notes on it. But those kids acted like the kids at James River did. And it was a guy playing an acoustic guitar, and another guy beating on a box, basically.
Yeah, the
But-
box drum.
Yeah, the box drum.
There's an actual name for it. I just can't think of it.
Yeah,
at the moment.
but just seeing them wanting to be as close to that altar as they could to praise and worship, I started crying and it broke my heart, and I started praying and thanking God for that moment, seeing you guys there, realizing that I was away from home, I was very out of my comfort zone, but God was still there. And so when you hear somebody say God's always with you, and you're like, yeah, it is what it is. I mean, he truly is. And in that moment, I began to realize that it wasn't home church, but I still felt the same presence of the very same God at home church whenever we were in Aurora. And I seen those kids raising their hands. And there was something, like I said, I just started crying. For me, that was just, I was empty and the Lord filled me up in that moment. Something like the workers getting to see that, to you, has there been any students that have stood out to you? And you don't have to use their names, but just kind of a story, an example of some kids who maybe this was their first time at Encounter and what they happened, because the kid that was in the wheelchair was a phenomenal, I mean, he was in a wheelchair and he would leave every night and then he would come back to that church in the morning, and you would have never known if he were to just sit in a chair, you would have not known his disability affected him at all, because he was talking about God, how much he loved God, praising God. That for me, that, and then the girl who said that it had been a couple of happenings she hadn't been to and she had suicidal thoughts, and she was like, I didn't come to the happening, but I knew I had to be here for the worship portion of it. 2 stories right there in just 3 weekends. For somebody like you who's on the board, who's been to multiple of them, what's probably one of your favorite stories? Like I said, you don't have to use a name or anything, but is there one specific story that really just to you was like, oh, man, that's...
Well, I think the vulnerability that happens with teenagers in general is crazy when you can see that. When you provide an opportunity for that, and it's one of those things that we try to talk to them too about, like, this isn't the only place this can happen. Like, right now, this is how you're feeling, but like, you need to go back out in the world and share that with others. I think, honestly, another one that really touched me was from this weekend too, was about one of the girls, her mom passed away when she was like 7, and now her dad's struggling with a possible cancer diagnosis, and just to be able to come together in prayer with everyone in that moment to pray against cancer and just in Jesus' name was really powerful. I think too, there was another one that this kid, he came and he had been fighting off he's felt called to maybe help with youth ministry or worship, but he was like, this isn't, like, that's not for me, or he was trying to avoid it. And by the end of the weekend, he was helping lead worship because he just felt like God's call on him that weekend was to do that. And now he does it with his youth group. Like, he's stepping out in that call. And so I think those are some opportunities or some stories that, like, God is real. My prayer always is after a Saturday night or after a happening is that these kids did not pick up what they left at the altar, that they left it and they said, God can have it and I'm going to move on. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, is just to be in prayer, or to pray about that, is like that God, that they had an experience, but they had an encounter that changed their lives forever. So yeah, that's my hope for them and my prayer.
All right, folks, we have reached a part of the podcast where we're going to do like a little intermission type thing. We're going to go ahead and throw out a few sponsors here. But if anybody is interested in finding out how to get their child involved in Happening, Caitlin, how would they go about that?
You can reach out to me or Brittany Presley or Kaylin and Jacob Woody, and we can get you in contact. Right now, their website is under construction. Yes, and so I don't have a specific place you can go, but you can talk to us, and we'll get you in contact with Mark Holland, who's in charge.
So I'll give your phone number out over public airways so you can accept phone calls at all times of the night. Caitlin, thank you very much. I know the sad parts of the story aren't fun to talk about, but I appreciate you just letting everybody know what you've been through and how no matter what happens, God can bring you through it. And people hearing testimonies like that, it's going to help. People are going to begin to realize that if we're not afraid to talk about our problems, because that's what we are. We're one big walking problem. Each and every one of us, we're a big walking problem. And the only thing that can save us is Christ. And the moment that you continue to walk yourself as a walking problem, you're going to occur them. Christ comes into your life to weed those problems out. And people seem to think that, okay, weeding those problems out is going to be God not harming me and everything's going to go through. A weeding process isn't necessarily fun all the times. It's not always, you're not going to have a party every night. You're not going to go home every night feeling well-rested, loving everybody. There's going to be times where you get tired. There's going to be times where you get frustrated. All of these emotions are going to happen because we are one big walking problem. We are sin. And the thing is, whenever Christ came and died for us on the cross, he died so that we are no longer sin, that we would be covered in his blood. And the only way that you can truly live in that walk is knowing who you are, knowing that that's what he's done for you. And the whole Happening experience was one that it really opened up my eyes to. I think Jacob and Kaylin gave a kid a ride who his mom is an alcoholic and he was tired of it and he was going to go to the Happening regardless. So he snuck away and got a ride with Jacob and Caitlin, and he went to the Happening. Somebody who is willing to do that, who is willing to reach for Christ's robe like that, they're going to go from Springfield, Missouri, all the way to Aurora because they want to touch the coattail of Christ's robe. To me, that was amazing. That was another story too. That I was afraid of my mother. She was an evil, awful woman. No, I'm just joking. I love you, Mom. But I had respect, and I was afraid to run. I would never have ran away. But for somebody to do that for Christ, I mean, that was another thing that really spoke to me was he didn't care. Like he knew the lifestyle that he was going to lead if he stayed wasn't right. He wanted God. So the Happening again, Caitlin Nash, Kaylin Woody, Jacob Woody. I'm sure Zach wouldn't be opposed to going and grabbing his wife and saying, hey, these people are... So back here, anybody back here, Caitlin Nash, we really, really do appreciate you coming on this podcast and opening up. Right now we are going to do a little halftime. We're going to go ahead and throw out some sponsors for our next guest. So that way if you want to stretch your legs and some of you got your 40 minutes of podcast in for the day, we've got coming up next... her husband is just a great man.
He really is.
Brooklyn Plumley coming up next. My wife. I'd like to give a shout out to Beards and Riffs. I have recently started a new job, and my job requires my face to be in front of the public. And with that face, my beard looks an absolute wreck if I don't tame it in the mornings, and the taming cure is Beards and Riffs. Zach, tell us a little bit about Beards and Riffs, would you?
Beards and Riff was created by Nathan Winfield, and for the life of me, I can't remember Wayne's last name, but Nathan Winfield and Wayne. They came together in a love for beards and music and created Beards and Riffs to tame those ungodly hairs in your majestic beards. not only here at home church, but around the country and hopefully the world. But they share their love and passion for Christ through their company, which is phenomenal to see. And not only just do they have great products, but they smell really good too.
They smell delicious. And um, I said it on the first podcast for Christmas, having a beard. The loving family, the first thing they do is buy the beard care products. And um, out of the kindness of my heart, I used said products, and my face felt like the top of this table here. It was awful. Um, I am finally now back to the nice, smooth feeling beard skin with the oil Beards and Riffs. So, Beards and Riffs, I want to thank you. Zach wants to thank you. And everybody who's gone to James Automotive this week wants to thank you for the wonderful products that you provide. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get back into it. We have Zach Nash, Caitlin Nash, Brooklyn Plumley, and Nathan Plumley. Zach, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Caitlin, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Brooklyn, say hi to everybody.
Hello.
All right, so for those of you, this is the same podcast. We have, we're not going to chop it and cut it and put two different ones. We're just going into a real long one. So we are coming back from our halftime break. We talked about Caitlin and her walk with Christ and the difficulties that Christ brought her through. We talked a little bit about the happening and the experience. Again, if you are interested in getting your child into the happening or anything like that, nature, Caitlin, Kaylin, Woody, Jacob, Woody, or Zach will probably be a good help, or myself. I've been there. So Brittany, I forgot about Brittany. Sorry, Brittany. Brittany, don't get mad. Oh, she's going to be mad. Oh, no, she's going to be mad now. Sorry, Brittany. But anyways, so Brooklyn, how are you today?
I'm doing good.
Brooklyn, would you like to explain to the folks what areas of the church you volunteer in?
Yes, I volunteer in the K through 5 kids, and I also help with the greeting when I can. And then we do the youth on Wednesdays together.
All right. Brooklyn, would you like to share with the folks your testimony, your walk with Christ, and I'll probably do what I do best and cut in somewhere and ask a question and then forget where we were talking about. But if you would like to start the process of your testimony with your walk with the Lord.
Yeah, I grew up. My grandma was a big part of my life. My mom was a teen mom, and then she eventually married my dad. And my mom and dad's views were always that you don't have to go to church to know God, which I believe that's true. But I think that being in church changes the way that you see God work and the way that you can build a community and really have an impact in your community. But my grandma and grandpa, I spent a lot of time with them as a kid. And we went to a Methodist church. I think it's because it's like the only one my grandpa was comfortable with. It was like hymn books, which I love a good hymn book, okay? And just everyone shook the preacher's hand on the way in and the way out. And you had dinner every single first Sunday of the month.
I forgot about the old
The good
walking
old
out.
potluck. Yeah.
No, not even
Oh,
the
the shaking
potluck.
the
The
hand.
shaking the
Oh,
hand
yeah.
as you're walking out. Rev, you
Good
need to
message,
make
Rev.
that a thing
Yes,
now,
sir.
Rev. Well, the problem is Rev would be standing outside if it's cold outside for
Yep.
4 hours because people stand around here and talk. But yeah, I want to shake Rev's hand from now on whenever we leave. He needs to be standing door front.
Would you give him the one handshake or like the double?
I would do the one where you clench so hard the knuckles roll over. So, and he's still got a smile, you know. Good day, good day, good day, good day. Nice to meet you. Howdy, howdy. Sorry about that, but anyways.
No, it's fine. So we went to a Methodist church every Sunday. When I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, I spent nearly every summer there. Lot of weekends because I was an only child, and down the road lived my best friend, Megan, and so we would hang out all week if we could, or weekend, and then we would go to church, and that was a thing. My grandma always sang in any church. I can't remember her not singing. She sang at the Esquire in Bolivar, which it's kind of cool. It's like a theater almost vibe, but it was Wednesday nights, and so I grew up watching her do that. I actually got baptized there in 5th grade, I want to say it was. So that was really cool because I come from a split family. My mom and my biological dad obviously had me super young, and so they split really young, and that was fine. There's no hurt there or anything like that. But it was just cool because all of my family came together that day and all sat together to like support me in my walk of being like, yeah, I want to do this. And one thing I have to say, like my mom always let it be a choice. She didn't push it on me. My grandma was really excited about it. I'm not gonna lie, she maybe pushed a little bit. But my mom made sure to sit me down and be like, do you understand what this is? Do you understand what you're saying? Do you understand?
And
The
for
meaning.
all those listening, if Mandy is listening, Mandy refers to Brooklyn's grandma as hot grandma. So I would prefer it if you would refer to grandma as hot grandma throughout the rest of this podcast. No, I'm just joking.
I'm sorry, she is a hot grandma. But yeah, so basically a lot of my background just comes from like my grandma and kind of like making sure that we went to church every Sunday. It wasn't really an option. You were gonna go stay with grandma and grandpa, which was great. It was so much fun. You were gonna do all this fun stuff, but Sunday was you were gonna go to church, which was fine. It was a good thing. Like we liked it, we enjoyed it. So um, I mine's just a little bit different than a lot of people's because again, my parents we did go to church, but it wasn't like a consistent thing. It was a God is everywhere thing, and we can still know Him at home. And I did go a lot of times, like with friends, on Wednesday nights or sometimes on Sunday nights. We would go where I would go to church with friends from school and stuff. But it was just, I guess, my relationship with God always came like more within, like it was always like, don't be scared to talk to him. Like he's literally always there. And sometimes I feel like a crazy person because I'll be talking to him in my car, and I'm like, if somebody pulls up next to me, they're gonna be like, who is she talking to? But yeah, I would say that it's something that's always been constant in my life. And I would say though, like not until we started coming to home church did I realize how important the community part of it was. And the finding purpose part of it because Nathan came here first actually, and then I came like I don't know a couple Sundays later, and he was like, everyone wants you to come to lunch, and I was like, who's everyone? Hold on a second. And yeah, so Red Robin was our first time, and I sat down and after church and I met everyone, and they were like, we've been waiting to meet you and talk to you, and it just clicked. I don't know what it was, but also I with my background always being like in and out of church, like after I got old enough, in high school more, I wasn't always going to my grandparents because I was a teenager and I had a lot of stuff going on, and that my parents still went to church sometimes, but it was like we're going on Easter or we're going on Father's Day. It wasn't like a consistent thing. So coming here and walking through the doors, I was like, we'll see what happens. I wasn't fully on board. Just honestly, I was like, well, we'll see what happens. But he had already gotten into like the volunteering part of it and walking in, and being like, hey, I want to help. I want to do this. And it was probably, I don't know, a couple services. And then I just felt led to volunteer. And I was like, all right, you know what, this is where you want us. This is where we're going to be. So I'll fill out that card that the welcome card. And I'll help where I'm needed, wherever that may be. I'm naturally drawn to kids. I don't know why. They're just funny. They're very real. The innocence that they have is just so precious, and I love it. And just their like look on life is so different than adults in general. So that's where I really wanted to help, but I was like, I'll greet, I'll do whatever. And so I filled out that card and then got more involved, and now I if I miss a Sunday or if I don't get to serve, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, it doesn't feel right. So it feels like a family. It's something that I didn't know that I was missing, but that I'm so thankful that we found. And just like the little things, like I'll tell you right now, I never would have gone to a women's conference ever because I was like, women together all weekend. Like, holy cow. Do they realize they're sleeping like all in the same room, like, or the same house? Like, that's a lot, you know? But I love the Flourish events and the women in this church, and I can't wait for our next one. Like, I want you to tell me, but I know you probably can't tell me, but I'm like, can you tell me the details? Because it was a blast. It was the best. And so, like, it's just something that I didn't know that I was missing, and that I'm so glad that, like, God opened my heart and was like, hey, you need to do this, and you need to be open to this, because it's moved not only me individually, but I think, like, in our marriage too. And then, like, our family and the way that we talk to our friends and stuff. And I was a little bit nervous that I would lose some friends just with being so vocal about going to church and everything. But really, my friends have been nothing but more supportive. So that's, yeah.
And that's a lot of people, whenever the first thought in your head is, am I going to lose such and such as a friend? And my thing, I mean, obviously, as my wife, you can attest. I mean, I'm not a person that will answer your text every day, answer your phone call every day. I'm not gonna, my mom, my mom can attest to it. I may call you 3 days later. I just set my phone down and I don't really pay attention to it. But if you need me, I will definitely be there. So, with that being said, knowing that, talking about friendship and stuff like that, and how you're worried about you're going to lose friends because you're in this such and such, this area. But I think that I can attest on my part of it. Um, there were times where you're more of like a hangout with friends than I am. I would say, well, I'm not going to say it. It's true.
Caitlin's the same way.
If you want to come over to my house and hang out at my house, that's fine. But when I can get rooted at home,
Yep, 100%.
I enjoy being at home. So I don't, if you're more than welcome to come over, but getting me out is going to be another decision that I'm going to have to make on a later day. I'll get back with you. So, but having friends that you don't mind going to Aurora with and spending 3 days in a church that you've never been to, around a group of people that you only really know 5, and you still feel at comfort and you still feel at home. I know things that, like the stuff that you've overcome and stuff that he's helping you overcome and stuff like that. So we'll get into more of those, but whenever it comes to friends and whenever it becomes how people view you, what is advice you would give to somebody who is saying, I really like hanging out with Clyde. We go every Friday and we have a beer, and then every Saturday we have a couple more beers, and then all of a sudden you meet somebody here at church and you're like, I hope Clyde doesn't get mad, but I really don't want to drink. You know what? I'll just go with Clyde on Saturdays, and we'll have a beer on Saturdays. And then, either Clyde's going to get mad at, because I don't want to tell him and I don't want to talk to him about church because, that's that side of, I don't want him to judge me. What are some things that you can tell people who, whether it is they don't want their family to know, whether it is somebody who they don't maybe want people at work to know because they don't want to be judged? What are some things that you noticed that Christ really helped you with whenever it came to that particular situation?
And that I would just say that, like, I prayed about it, like, God, I don't want to lose my friends, but, like, if that's the weeding that needs to happen, then so be it. But I think also just being yourself, and being honest with them. You don't have to always go out to have a beer and be like, "Hey, did you know what happened?" Or I mean,
You
you
love
can.
that.
You,
You're not a beer, but did you hear about? No, I did. Tell me
I
everything.
mean, I meant like you don't have to be like we're gonna pray right now for this, But I just think that like just being open with them and kind of opening that door to them to be like, if you need something, I'm here to pray about it. Three of my best friends in the world, they if you look through our group thread, it wouldn't always have prayer requests in it, but recently everyone was going through something. Like one of my best friends, the entire household was throwing up, and the other one, she was pregnant and she was like, I'm just exhausted. I'm tired. One of my other friends, her husband's out of town all the time. And she was like, I have 2 kids and I'm by myself. And it's really overwhelming. And so it was just kind of cool because like our thread is normal, but then that week, they were all asking for prayer. And so I think it just can open a door that, to be like, I'm not going to shove it in your face, but if you want to talk about it, I'm here for it. Absolutely. I think just being open and honest with them, and there's going to be conversations where you're like, hey, I've changed that. Like, I'm not doing that anymore. And it doesn't mean you don't have to be friends anymore. And maybe they'll change their ways too. So I would say just be open with them and pray about it and let God do his thing, because he's always going to, whether you want him to or not. You know what I mean? So he's going to do it in his ways, the best way. So it's all going to work out.
And I can attest to, sometimes you just have to shut those doors with some of your friends.
Yeah.
I mean, there was in my life a time to where it came down to an ultimatum. It was either choose that friend or lose Caitlin.
Yeah.
And obviously I made the right choice, but sometimes it's that hard, and God puts it to be like, hey, here's your wake up call, man. You're not getting it.
Yeah.
But other times, I mean, you can still be friends and hang out, and just change your lifestyle a little bit. But sometimes you do need to cut them out completely,
Right.
to continue, what God needs you to do. So
Yeah. And
don't be afraid to do the hard things as well.
right. Yes, that's true too. Because there are some friends that I'm like, I will love you from a distance, but I just can't. I can't do that anymore because of the choices they make, and I can't support that. And so, it is what it is. But I think also a lot of people have the assumption that once you have a church friend that like, oh, you can't say that, or you can't joke about that, or they're all still people. They all still like to
Right,
laugh.
yeah.
And, so I think that's important too, to just not put them in a category of, oh, I have a lot of strict boxes around this, because I mean, I can say like a lot of things you can talk about that they've already experienced in the group too.
One thing that I realized whenever just happened to, whether it was giving a devotion on Wednesday or talking to the youth kids, one thing that you have to realize is when you worry about, the moment you start thinking about what other people are going to think, it overwhelms you. And it's easy to just slip into that mindset, hey, are they judging me for this or for this? And when you get to that place where you can realize that it's going to end one way, and that way is God winning, Jesus winning. And so they can make fun of me for believing that. But another thing, like, and this isn't me bragging, but one thing that I haven't always been bold in belief of what God can do for me, but I've not always been that bold, but I have been bold enough that I would never. You're not, like, one of my friends has never said you have to pick Jesus or me, because that wouldn't have bothered. I'd been like, peace, I'm gone then. Like that was. I always had enough faith in him that I was. So that has never really been. If somebody asked me about it, that's not been an issue. But for a lot of people, that is something that they don't want to. I'm fine with going to church, and I'm fine with keeping a low profile. so I'm fine with that because I don't want people to get mad at me. I don't want people to do this and this and this. And one thing that I would urge you is that God's not going to put you in a situation where you are working for Him that you can't handle. And a lot of people hear that God's not going to give you anything you can't handle. That's not true. There's nothing on this earth that we can handle. That everything we do by the grace of God. God is with us every step of the way. So my point is, if you are under the impression that God is going, I don't even really know, I don't know how I want to describe that. It's almost like, I don't know. I don't know. The Lord's not giving me anything, so I don't want to go any further with that. But I think a lot of people, I don't know, I just feel like a lot of people really, whenever it comes to God and it comes to the idea of He doesn't give you more than you can handle, like in a situation that He puts you in, with your going forth with Him, you've already won. So if you go into the mindset where God doesn't give me anything I can't handle, sometimes people will lay down a little bit and they're like, okay, well, this isn't something that I can, instead of jumping forward in faith and being like, you know what, God, I'm trusting you. So when somebody comes to you and says, hey, you want to speak in front of, do a devotion, that can be very intimidating. And you're like, okay, you know what, God's not going to give me anything I can't handle. So I'm feeling a little nervous right now, so that must mean God's telling me, no, don't go forward with it because I'm nervous. Well, sometimes there's certain things where you're like, if you don't go forward and take advantage of this, and you did that by letting them know you're here for prayer, and that opened up that door, that opened up, and being bold in your faith and saying, I am a churchgoer, I'm not going to give that up. And whenever the first person was like, hey, can I ask for, then the other one became comfortable. They were like, oh, so she's going to ask for prayer. So that means that it's not weird now. So now we can do this. And so whenever somebody says, that God never gives you anything you can't handle, everything you're given you can't handle. That's the whole purpose. You are giving something you can't handle to break you so you realize, I can't handle this. This is a God thing. So then you say, okay, well, didn't you just, though, say that, God's never going to put you in a situation you can't handle? When you use Him as your vessel, when you go through Him as your vessel, you will never fail. It is those moments whenever you're like, okay, you know what, God, I trust you, but I really need to make sure that I've got enough in my bank account before I do this because, that's a lot of money. That's just, no, you got to have faith. You got to go forward. Sometimes God's calling you to something that you think is not possible because it is possible. He's proving a point to you. I'm the God of everything. You thought this wasn't possible. So I know I strayed way off on that, but opening the door for the friends and stuff like that, we're going to do what we did to Caitlin, and we're going to pry into the wound a little bit here. I know, and you're not going to say it, but anxiety is a big issue that you have. And I'm not making fun of you. This isn't, I've had anxiety before. It was coming in spurts. It was never like, my big thing was more of a depression type of deal. But whenever it comes to anxiety, there are a lot of different things and different levels of anxiety. I mean, it may be something little that gives you anxiety and something big doesn't bother you at all, and sometimes it could be something, just the opposite. It's got to be really big to give me anxiety. Whenever you started here at Home Church, I know that it was, for us anyways, we were in a marriage that was, I'm not going to say at all broken, but it wasn't the best, and it was a lot due to me. I was a very selfish, conceited person, and I didn't really care about you. I only cared about me. So whenever you're supposed to be in a relationship with somebody, and they're selfish, they're not helping you out, this one's going to kind of be a double-edged sword because it's going to cut me a little bit. Whenever you're in a marriage like that, and you're just looking for a piece of hope, for something, and you have anxiety on top of that, and now you look at where we're at right now and our marriage, and we have a child on the way. What are things that helped, that God gave to you to help you through those times? Just so everybody understands, like, I wasn't a very good person. And so you hear me talk and you hear me get up and give devotions. You have to realize that that is a miracle and a blessing of itself, because if you knew me 3 years ago, there probably wouldn't be a whole lot of people in this church that would wanted to have talked to me. I was, like I said, conceited. And so to have somebody go from only worrying about them, almost bankrupting us, um, really head in the clouds, those things have happened to people who are in better places now. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. What were some things that helped you through that process?
I think that, well, first of all, I mean, I think we both had our things in the marriage to do what it did. But um, I think that praying about it, like, it's almost, I feel like selfish in a way, but I will pray to God and be like, God, I just don't want this anymore. Like, I don't even know why I'm trying to hold on to it. But I don't want anything to do with this, and I need you to either guide me or, yeah, guide me through it, or guide me in the way of where we need to go. But I don't want to feel this way anymore. Um, Anxiety, I mean, again, it's a little thing that can cause it to spike, or it's, I mean, a big thing, like a big event that we have coming up or something like that. It can be anything like that. But I think that just giving it to God, but also in that God worked through you, which then led us to come to church more, which then led us to be where we are now, where we both serve in the church. And so I think that God worked through me, but I think He also worked through you. And I think that that is a big part of it. Like, it wasn't just God working through me, it was, God, I don't know what the answer is, but I know you know. And so I just pray that we have open hearts to receive what it is that you have for us, and to move forward. And I mean, He did. He moved through. You came to the church before I did. So that was, yeah, that moved us closer in our marriage too.
And yeah, that's that. But I mean, whenever you're in a marriage like that, what was it? What was an what made you want to work on it, in a sense? I guess I should say. What is something that kept you faithful and kept you in the mindset of this marriage is gonna work? What was it that was it? You mentioned earlier that your mom was young whenever she had you, and so your biological father, that didn't last long. So your mom, and you didn't mention this, but she had a couple of other relationships that weren't good relationships, abusive men. Was it seeing that and saying, like, I don't want that. I want the very opposite of that. I want one good, healthy marriage, and that's what drove you. What drove you to keep the marriage going? Because at that time, um, that was like the last thing on my mind, was keeping the marriage together. Yours was just the opposite. What kept what? I guess that would have been a better question. What continued to drive you? What gave you faith?
Um, I guess coming from a broken family, or just families that there's a lot of divorce and like reconnections and all of that, I knew what I wanted and what I didn't want from those marriages. We are blessed to have a lot of marriages surrounding us, and you kind of get to be like a buffet and be like, I want this out of that marriage. I don't want this. I want that. And I knew that, like, I just wasn't going to let it fail. Like, I knew, I was like, God brought us together. God you know, I don't know what's going on right now, but I know that like you're going to take us through it. And I'll be honest, at the time I didn't know that it would be a testimony, but I knew that I wanted it to work and that I loved you and that there wasn't a reason, like God wouldn't have put you in my life to just let that all go away. And I guess a little bit of my stubbornness that he blessed me with is that I wasn't going to give up. And I think it brought me closer to him in a way because there was a lot of praying on a balcony. So I think just putting like my trust in him. But it was mainly just that like I loved you and I knew that like what I wanted for our kids one day. I wanted them to have a healthy marriage and maybe that was just our time to work through that because I think every marriage has their struggles at some point.
And so, whenever it's all said and done, we're here at home church. We found family. We found purpose. I don't think people realize the amount of anxiety that you used to have. I mean, I remember there was one time where I came home and we didn't have when we were in the apartments, we didn't have something, and we were so broke. I mean, we really couldn't afford it, and so we were charging this credit card to this credit card, this and this and this, and I mean, it really didn't take a whole lot to, I mean, have a breakdown. Uh, from that to where you're at now, how, what do you do? What have you noticed different in the processes that you've done that help alleviate? Obviously, we're not 100 or not $100,000 in debt, but however, we had 17 credit cards, and my car payment was $800 a month almost, and um, so obviously that helps not having those lingering over your head. But it was by grace. I mean, if it hadn't have been, we were fortunate enough to be able to get rid of that car and then pay your car off. I kept it, so that was a God thing. What are some other things that you've noticed ever since starting to hand these things over to God? Give us an example of how you would have reacted to something to how now those anxieties you can just begin to realize something that used to bother you. What are a few things that used to bother you really bad that now you look at and you're just, it makes you almost want to cry in joy because those are no longer there because I have those. I know I have those. So, I mean, you may not, I don't know. But what are some things that you look at and sometimes they bring you to tears because you realize you have been brought up out of instead of looking at it as I'm never going to get out of here. Now you're looking at that situation, and it almost chokes you up a little bit because you're like, man, I can't believe God did that for me.
Well, I know what the answer is as far as like what I used to do versus what I do now. And what I used to do was try to fix it myself. I was like, God, I know that you're there and thank you, but like, I'll handle this. I'll find the money or I'll find whatever it was at the time. And now my first reaction is I'm going to pray about it. And, you know, I'm going to pray that your hand is over it no matter what. And that I have an open heart and mind and ears and eyes to see what you have for me. I mean, at one point in time, I had a job that was, my anxiety was so crippling that like I wouldn't go to work. I would just, I would call in and I would have like a panic attack and just, I wouldn't be able to leave the apartment. And I think that like me not trying to do it myself and do everything myself and understand that I have people around me to support me, whether it be friends or you or family. Understanding that like it's not all on you and that God puts people in your life to lift you up and build you up through that because if I've had anxiety about it, I know I have a friend somewhere that's gone through it or something similar. And I think I think God puts those people in your life for that reason. And I think that's just being able to talk about it with other people, I think helps you to heal. And I think God puts those people in your life. So again, I would just say like not trying to do it yourself and just trusting him in that. I know money was a thing for us. So, tithing, that was a conversation that we had. And you said, I don't care what you do with your check, but for my check, we're going to do this. And then I followed in suit. And honestly, when we started tithing as we should, a lot of our money problems went away.
And the thing, like, whenever it comes to tithing, there's a lot of, and I just want to, take a little side jot on this. Whenever it comes to tithing, I wasn't pushing the tithing because I was like, it's 10%, we got to pay 10%. It was because whenever, like, I was 20, 22, whatever, I would tithe every now and then when I needed something. It was kind of like sending a wish list to Santa. Hey, God, I'm going to put $10 in the offering bin, but I really need discounts on those tires and wheels and stuff. So Monday, whenever I go, that's not how it works. Tithing is one of those things where if you're donating $70 and you're like, I'm comfortable with this, that's not the point of a tithe. The tithe is a point of, hey, this is money that we need right now, but I know you're bigger than the money that we need because you're God. You don't need our money. So I'm going to go ahead and tithe anyways. So as far as the amount of a tithe or whatever, we won't get into that topic of conversation. I think what people truly miss about a tithe is the heart behind it. I mean, you could put a penny in there. I've heard Clayton say it a million times, telling the story about the prostitute with the oils. That's all she had. I mean, she didn't. That's all she had, and she gave it up freely. And in God's eyes, that was beautiful because she gave up all she had. So whenever it comes to like a tithe, we weren't fighting over like the. I mean, it was the amount to an extent because you were like, can't we just do like $20 here and there? And
We were also very broke at the time still.
but that was the thing. Like it was knowing that the $90 or the $80 a week that we were tithing at the time, that could have gone to groceries, but instead it was going to God, and that came through with the whole house with Hannah and all that situation. But just I wanted to just make a note to that to everybody. It wasn't like I was slapping her around over 10% and
No, no.
woman, listen, it wasn't that. It was just
No.
I knew the point and the principle behind it, and money was the center focus of our marriage for 3 years. I mean, just how do we get more of it? How do we spend it? How do we do this and this and this? So that was the reason behind the tithing, because I had done it every now and then, and I was like, this is what we got to do. So you can do what you want with your check, and I will do with mine. And we started seeing the fruits of those labor. I mean, I can't even remember what all happened after that. My car broke down, my car did this, the car did that, and you got a flat and everything. And it was like every time we would want to take that 80, and it's like, we need to do a repair of this or this. And we were like, no, we're going to tithe with it. And it just blossomed into something very beautiful. So the point behind the tithe there is I'm sorry for taking such a long road off of that like I tend to do, but that was the point behind that. So
Yeah, and it's something that we've always, not like this in a bragging way, but anything you've given in a tithe or just your time of serving God, you will always see like so much more come back than what you've given.
and that's the thing, like it's not about, because we can never give, well, we will never be able to give enough.
Yeah.
And so that's another big portion of that tithing too, is realizing that God doesn't need $80.
Right.
He doesn't need my $80. He needs me. He wants me. He longs for me. And so whenever you begin to give him, if all you can afford is $10, then throw $10 in there and see what God doesn't do Monday whenever you don't think that you can do anything because it's Monday, and the next thing you know, your life goes on, and it's really cool to kind of see those things perspire. What's a good word to use here, Caitlin? She doesn't know.
Is prevail a good one?
No, that's not the one I was looking for. Anyways, Caitlin, do you have any questions for Brooklyn? We got to get something. Come on.
Well, can you just, if you don't,
Yeah.
just share about, because I know we were kind of in the same, about like having a baby. So can you share that?
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. It's inspiring to me. So let's hear it.
So we are currently expecting. I'm 6 months, almost 7 months pregnant.
Yay, she didn't say weeks.
Uh,
We don't have to do math.
Don't worry, I try to not be that person, but I mean sometimes. But I would say, like, even when we had our really hard times, like, we always wanted kids no matter what. And we prayed about it. I would say, like, our testimony together, I don't want to overspeak here, but our testimony together has always been like, whatever your timing is. There were several times I was tracking, not to be gross, but I was tracking my period and ovulations on an app. And while that can be encouraging, it can also be very discouraging as well. And so, I would tell him, like, hey, this is the time, or this is whatever. And we would try, and then it wouldn't happen. And he would even do checks that I didn't know about until he told me a lot later on of, like, oh, did you have your period, or are you pregnant, or where are you at? And I think we both kind of, to an extent, got a little frustrated. And I think that that's just being real. That, you're like, okay, God, I did this, I did that, I'm opening this door, like, why hasn't it happened yet? And I've always been asked, like, when are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? And it's, that's always an awkward question. I know it's meant with love, but it's also a question where it's just like, I can't give you that answer, and it kind of hurts that you're asking a little bit sometimes. But, we prayed about it, and in a weird way, like, I'm thankful that God waited until now, because I know that there's absolutely no way that we could have, like, I mean, obviously with him, anything's possible, but looking back on our lives in those seasons, it wasn't right. And no matter how much our hearts longed for it, no matter how much we prayed for it, like, that just wasn't the right time. And honestly, like, we weren't a part of home church. We weren't a part of a church at all. And now I'm like, I'm so excited because we have a huge church family. And Willow will grow up knowing God and knowing all these people that love her and that will help her in those situations where she's like, I don't know what to do right now, or just guiding her, like, maybe she'll go to the happening with you guys. And so just, like, I think, I don't know, I mean, it was a struggle, but I think that we both struggled with it in our own ways. Like, I didn't realize how much it, like, upset him. Because as a woman, you're like, well, I feel like I'm responsible for this a little bit. But, like, I didn't realize how much it upset him or, like, impacted him until a little bit later on. But I think that we just both gave it to God, and we were like, when you're ready, great, we're ready. But I think we just kind of both laid our hearts down at the same time, and we're just like, we're exhausted. Like, so, and then it happened, and we got to tell everyone, which was huge. But it's something that, like, I would always say, like, don't try to control it. Like, God's going to give it to you. And of course, pray for it and have people pray over you. I think one of the most impactful nights was a Wednesday night, and my mother-in-law was sitting next to me, and Clayton asked, like, is there anyone that wants prayer for anything? And she was like, that's you. And I was like, shut up. And so I was like, okay, like, I'm going to be bold and ask for this. And this is, that anxiety was there, but I was like, I'm going to ask for prayer over this. And it doesn't have to be in my time, but whenever God's ready, like, that's what I want. And so I stood up and I asked for prayer, and people laid hands on me and him. And I don't know how long it was after that, but we were pregnant. So, and it was like one of the best things to be able to like tell the church, because you guys have prayed for us, you know what I mean? And so, and we pray for you guys, and so excited for when baby Nash is here. Like, I can't even deal. Okay. Can't wait. But I know the road of heart, and baby Woody. Yes. I know like the hard road, and like how hard it is on your heart to go through all of that. So I would just say we want everything in our own timing. I'm a control freak a little bit. I'll just be honest. But I think just really, truly giving it to him, because in the times that I wanted that so bad, it just wouldn't have been right. So I think just staying like steady in that. And Miss Ellie, I mean, that woman, she's got some good verses if you guys ever need a verse about like carrying, or, you know. But just know too that like, as big of a blessing as it is for us, like, we're still praying for that blessing for you guys, because we're very excited. and baby Woody too.
Any questions, Zach?
No, I don't think I have anything. Yeah.
It was, I think you have to open your heart. There's a song by Elevation Worship, and in the song it talks about we receive your rain. And so many times people put an umbrella up during a rainstorm because they're trying to protect themselves. And when you listen to that song, it talks about, well, obviously receiving your rain, but you think about how sometimes we seclude ourselves and we don't open up and take in the rain, because the Lord is just going to absolutely soak you with blessings. We begin to think that we're not worth those blessings. We begin to think that, you know what, God, you say all things are possible, but maybe for me, you know, I've been there. I've been like, you know, God, we're sent to receive certain things, and I can't get this, I can't get this. You have to set your mindset to receive rain. You have to quit putting an umbrella up. You have to quit selecting with a little cup how much water you want. You have to be ready to take what it is that God's going to give you. And when you realize that God's not going to stop giving you as long as you stop asking, it's going to keep raining. And you're going to have days where it stops. You're going to have days where it quits raining, and you're going to have days where you feel like you're not going to receive any more rain. But you have to remember that He's the one that created the rain. He'll give you the rain whenever the rain is right. Whenever He sends the rain, you have to be ready to receive it. You have to be open to the fact that what God's giving you is yours. And that was kind of the principle behind that whole the lion situation on the devotion. Or that was the spiritual. Was that on Sunday? I began to pray, and I began to realize that I was praying for something that was just good enough for what I thought we deserved. Like, okay, we've put in a long week this week, you know, Lord. I've been to practice multiple times. This week, I think I'm going to pray for something a little bigger. And then you begin to forget about these things, because whenever you ask for something, you just begin to expect it from the Lord. It just becomes, and it's awesome sometimes the way that you can just rely on Him. Those moments when you begin to rely on Him instead of relying on how am I going to get this money. And so that was something, that song, and I've been playing it a lot recently just as a reminder. But I heard that song and I was like, what? Receive your rain. And I just kept listening to the song, and I was standing outside. Um, I think it was snow, whenever it was snowy outside. And I just got to thinking about what good would an umbrella do during snow? Like it's not like rain. And so I started thinking about that song again, and that's whenever the Lord kind of put those two together. And He was like, I've sent you out in a rainstorm, and you're carrying an umbrella and a suit. Why? Why would you do that when I've told you this is for you? And so that was something that I would urge whenever it comes to our vehicles are breaking down, and we've got this, and we want a kid, and we just have all of these things that we feel like are going to prohibit us from being in a certain spot with the Lord. You have to realize that He doesn't care about these situations. He doesn't care what you drive. He doesn't care. And when you begin to realize, okay, Lord, as soon as I'm thankful for what I do have and what has gotten me where I'm at, and you focus on Him instead of what I'm doing, it's a slow process, and it can be an agonizing process. But there's something about knowing that the situation doesn't look good, but knowing I may not have X, Y, or Z placed in the orders that I want them placed in. God placed them in His own orders, and they were spaced out different than I would want to. But in the end, it's worth it, and it's made stronger. Like, if this is just a quick off of that. I mean, if you're wanting, for the most part, we do it now if we're going to go shopping because we are such big spendaholics. I pray before we go out, Lord, give your boy, your boy likes his shoes and his video games. Okay, Lord, so keep your boy's eyes focused on straight path ahead. But you truly do have to, if you have a problem with something, you don't have to be afraid of that problem. Give it to the Lord. So the thing is if you're in the mindset of our problem is money, so we're just going to stay inside and not go out. Well, the devil's like, oh yeah, good. So now you can be depressed, broke, and nobody to talk to except each other. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pit you two against each other. Since you're not going out, I'm going to pit you two so that way all you do is argue and fight, and then I'm going to break you up. That's how those things process. That's how those things go. It starts off with something very minor and very little, and from there it just boom, 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 next thing after the next. Take everything to the Lord. And sometimes you're like, well, I don't hear Him. He's not an audible voice. He's not always an audible voice in my ear either. That whole weekend, I didn't have any devotions. I had devotions prepared that I had used during youth. But we got up there and I started beginning to realize the theme of this wasn't like some of the devotions. So there were times where I would be just sitting there not thinking, and the Lord would be like, hey, this and this and this. I should have been prepared for that thing weeks ahead. I came to there, anytime I spoke, there was nothing wrote down. The Lord just was like, hey, here. And if I would have went in there worried about it, the devil would have got what he wanted. I was out of my comfort zone. I didn't have anything prepared. Where's God? Where's God? Where's God? But instead, I was just like, I'm not going to worry about this. Whatever comes up, comes up. And the weekend just led as it did. And I'm not saying that everything that I said was just spot on, but there was no fear. There was no worry about getting up in front of people to speak. So whenever you begin to lay these things on Christ, and trust me, you're not going to be able to give them all up at once. It's difficult for us humans to do. We don't want to give Him everything at first. You start off with little things. And I'm not saying that this is how it is no matter what you do. But for the most part, people think that when you start your walk with Christ that you're going to start just running. I hate to say this, but as much as I love little baby Tate, he's not giving a sermon tomorrow. Like, he can't talk. Baby Tate's not going to give a sermon tomorrow. That's the same way with Christians. When you accept Christ, you turn into a baby Tate. You're a baby again. You're a full-grown man, but you're a baby again. You have to take these small steps. Quit telling yourself that these small steps aren't enough. These small steps are everything to the Lord. It's small steps that bring you out of those big pits. You have to build it a level at a time. And when you begin to stop building those steps to get out of that pit, when you get out of the pit, there's more journey. You're not done. But when you get out of that pit, you're no longer saying to yourself, oh, okay, you learn along the way how to get out of that pit. The Lord wants to show you how to get out of that pit because you're probably going to face it again. But instead of staying in there and slowly building those steps, you're able to just pick yourself back up off of the ground and we'll start on. So for those that are listening, just realize that all of these things, whether it was Caitlin's story, Brooklyn's story, Nash's story, my story, none of these things happened last week and we're doing the podcast today. This has been roughly a 6-year journey for me, on and off, heartache, heartbreak. We've been together 10 years, and so, no more than that, over 10 years. So these things aren't things that are going to be fixed overnight. You're not going to see these changes overnight. And the thing is that, like we said in the happening, you get that emotion, that feeling, and whenever it's done, you're like, either A, that was just for that day, and it's never going to happen again, or B, you keep chasing the same experience. And what I've learned through God is quit chasing the same experience because He's got better for you. So if you think that, like me, I never will forget whenever I came home from the first time we went and ate. We all went and ate at the Brick. I always want to say it's not Brick Street, but it's the pizza.
Town?
Is it Bricktown? Yeah.
Right? By Colton's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I came home, or I came back to the apartment, and Brooklyn was like, how was lunch? And it was like, man, it's like they were so polite, and they were like, I enjoyed after we got out of church going and doing and conversating like that. I was like, man, God's blessed me so much. It's never going to get better than that. And then the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. So if I would have just kept my mindset of, Lord, it's never going to get better than the day that we first ate, then where would I be? Like if I would have kept that as a place of this is as good as it gets, look what all has followed suit. It wasn't just one lunch. Now we're sitting here conversating for almost 2 hours about how great God is and just about how much we enjoy each other's company. So that's just something that I would urge a lot of people who think that their vision is too big or that God's not going to bless you with it because you're not serving enough. I'm not doing this. How often are you at church and how often do you serve? So that way we can jam it down your throat that serve. We're just simply letting you know that until you take that next step, sometimes that lunch with friends will be as good as it gets. If that's the mindset you keep, that's as good as it's going to get. You have to elevate your mindset. It wasn't until I woke up one morning and I started to thank God for Willow's room. And I was like, I just want to thank you for, which obviously we didn't know if it would be Willow, but I said the baby's room. I want to thank you for giving us a baby's room. And from there, you begin to realize when you set it in your mind that God can do anything, He can do anything. It may not be your timing. It may not be how you want it to do. It may not be the exact this and this and this the way that you wanted it to be. But you ask Him, you seek Him earnestly, and you're going to find Him. And I would very, very much stress you that whenever you ask Him something earnestly, it's going to happen. And I ask God earnestly for the opportunity to be able to spread His word, to be able to talk about Him. And I ask that, and there's a podcast, Wednesday devotions, Sunday spiritual moments, the happening, just a bunch of different things. And every Wednesday night speaking with the kids, you better be ready because He's going to answer and it's going to rain. And whenever it rains, be ready to accept. don't worry about whether you're good enough for it. Don't worry whether or not such and such doesn't have it and they've got this one, so they must be better. Whenever it rains on you, go get your rain bucket, soak it all in, set the umbrella down, because there will be a drought and you will need what it was that God rained on you, whether it's just the memory, whether it's just that moment. You're going to need that, and you're going to need to use that in the drought. So for those of you that are in a drought right now, be ready for the rain and quit saying that you're not worthy of the rain, because he is going to make it rain on you. And it's funny, make it rain sounds. It's true. It's true. And I mean, there's just no better explanation for it, because it just happens all at once. And it seems like, where did this come from? When did this happen? Like, whenever you're standing outside, every once in a while you'll feel like, oh, there's a few raindrops. Like, this isn't like that. Here's a few raindrops, and the rain cloud comes in. It's boom! So be ready, because, yes.
I think also just believing that you're going to receive it. Like, you don't know the timing, but just believing that you're going to receive it and thanking him ahead of time helps.
That is, that's all I've got. You guys got anything you want to add?
I don't think so.
Good.
No. I would plug, though, real quick, Dana's Oils. Freshly squeezed oils. They're my favorite. Shout out to my girl, Dana. If you ever want essential oils, they are phenomenal. I'm an oil snob. I used to only use Young Living, and now I'm, like, obsessed with their oils. So, Dana.
You don't get to do the sponsor. We're going to edit that out.
No.
I would like to give a shout out to Dana and her freshly squeezed essential oils, because no, I'm just joking. I had a blast here today. We're not going to do the Man Cave podcast afterwards, because this one we knew would run a little bit longer than most. So this will be the only podcast this week. We have yet to. Did we pick?
Leonard and Mandy will be on next week.
Ooh,
Yay.
ooh, the
with
mooses.
Baby Tape, probably.
Baby tape.
As Nolan says.
Yeah, as Nolan says, Baby Tape. So it will be on with us next week. As far as who we have after that, I don't have anybody planned that I know of.
So keep listening, right?
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
We did have Winfield on the schedule, but unfortunately he's going to be out of town. So maybe here in 2 weeks we can try to figure out getting a video conference together, and we can actually start doing video, and then he could be our first one. But at the moment, we don't have a way to do that, or we haven't figured it out yet. And we'll eventually try to get the Great White Well and get Rev on here.
Before we do leave, though, I know we've been through an emotional roller coaster back here as it is, but something that I'm looking over now and very admiring is a purple Cardinals hat on Zach Nash's head, with a very beautiful purple plaid shirt and a purple bracelet on. Zach, if you would please just describe to us what it is that the purple stands for and represents.
It's epilepsy awareness, and unfortunately, my sister passed away from it, from a rare condition called SUDEP, which is an extreme version of epilepsy. It basically, when it happens, it's like a brain aneurysm. It comes on so hard and so fast, it just ruptures like a brain aneurysm. And that's when she passed away. So today is the 8-year anniversary of her passing. So the purple is representing SUDEP and epilepsy awareness.
And for those that don't know Zach, what would you say for? Obviously, we have Caitlin, her father with cancer. Many of my family members with cancer. It is difficult to have those reunions, to have those date pops up, but you're in a good mood. You're smiling. We're here on the podcast. We're talking about what God has done for us, and we talked to Caitlin in Brooklyn. It's only notable that we give your sister the remembrance that she deserves. What are things that God helped you with in that process? Because not only, I mean, it's difficult enough to just have that memory, but whenever you have something like epilepsy, that is something that people are trying to fight and people are trying to help and so forth, there's that extra anytime that you see a purple ribbon on the back of a car, anytime you see commercials about it. You said that you dealt with depression as well and stuff like that. Just gotta give some people an insight on things that help you with that loss. And on this 8 years, what is something that God's done that you can look back and smile on and say, through it all?
First off, I would say to anybody that is either going through epilepsy or anything like that, get tested to figure out whether or not you have SUDEP. A lot of doctors don't like to talk about it because it can be scary and it could be life-ending, in a blink of an eye. Unfortunately, the doctors that Afton had didn't tell us about it, and they didn't want her to change her lifestyle or scare her because we found out when she was very, very young, I think like 6 or 7, that she had epilepsy. So they didn't want to, scare her or anything like that, which, I mean, I can be kind of happy for her, but also be like, dude, why didn't you tell us? At least then we could have, kind of prepared for it or something like that. But I don't know. On the anniversary, I like to think of it as a box. Your life is a box, and inside that box is a button, and with a big ball rolling around in it, which kind of sounds weird, but over time that ball gets smaller and smaller, and the days where that ball hits that button are are hard, and all those feelings go back, and sometimes it's like the end of the world again, and you get depressed and stuff like that. But like Caitlin and Brooklyn said, having that community and knowing who God is and not allowing yourself to go back to those moments are huge. So knowing that you have not only a huge support system, that you can reach out to, but knowing who you are and whose you are is a huge, huge thing. So yeah, there's going to be dates and anniversaries and stuff like that, or moments in time like weddings or birthdays or something like that. You're going to be like, you should be here. But just be grateful for the time that you had. So here I am, 31, 8 years without her, and like excuse me, I would love to have one more conversation with her. Tell her all the things that have happened over the last 8 years. But I know she's looking down. She got to meet my grandma that we haven't ever got to meet, so that I'm sure she's laughing up with her, hanging out with my other grandma, my grandpa, hanging out with a few of our dogs, because all dogs go to heaven, not cats. They're evil. But yeah, I mean, it's all about staying positive and remembering the good times. You can dwell on the past and try to get very, very depressed about well, they're missing out on this and that. And, my life's not the same without them, or it's really, really quiet now. But you got to just stay focused and remember who you are, and all that fun stuff. So.
Well, I think we all cried today. I think we all laughed today. I think we all had a good time today. It really was. It was fun. It is fun. And I think that one of the things that's important that we inform you of is everybody's situation is different. So whenever we say what our situation is, we're not telling you this is how it is, this is what God's got going on, and if it's any other way, that's not what we're saying. We're just wanting, if you can relate in any way, and talking about it helps. That's what we're here for. So if again we were talking about people on the podcast and who we have on this and this, if there's something you feel like maybe needs to be talked about a little bit more, or you think you have an experience that maybe some people do have, let us know, and we'll try to get you on. That's what we're about. We're not. I do. Looking back now, I'm not going to say I feel bad about it because it's what has to be done. But I mean, opening up the wounds. I don't think that if you're in this far in your journey, those wounds are still fresh. But sometimes you do leave the thorn in there, and you need to get the thorn out. And sometimes that is letting other people know, I'm just a human, man. I'm not anything great. There's nothing there's nothing extraordinary about me. I'm just an ordinary body, and it's the blood of Christ and who He makes me is what I am now. I'm not the old Nathan Plumley anymore. I don't miss him at all. I thank the Lord that He brought me out of that. And so to talk about things like our marriage and stuff like that, I mean, it's nice. So hopefully whenever people hear this, they're like, oh, they're not perfect. Because I don't ever want people to think that I've got things figured out, because I don't have things figured out. I'm leaning on God. And if something seems like it's going right for me, it's not me doing things right, it's God. And whenever you become complacent with where you're at in Christ, and you become okay with just being, it's kind of difficult to be a Christian and just be, because your spirit doesn't want that. Naturally, your spirit, if you're searching for Christ, your spirit wants to move. Your spirit wants to be out there. It's a light that doesn't want to be held in. So whenever you kind of try to hold that light in, that's what causes some problems, is you're telling your spirit, hey, I want you to do this, and you're holding it back. And you're like, why is everything so difficult? Just let it go. You just got to let it go sometimes. That's the best way for things to happen. And like that little brick thing that they did at Happening, we did that Wednesday night. And we didn't physically draw the bricks, but, I just kind of, and some got it, some didn't. But there were a few younger students who aren't, they're just friends. They don't know Christ. And they really opened up. And whenever they left, the one goes, I really just want to thank you for that really good conversation that we had. And I'll be back next week. And that makes it worth it, realizing that if I hadn't have, my thing with the Happening, another thing that really, I really realized that we were really, I was babying. I didn't want them to be uncomfortable because that's who I was as a kid. I didn't want to be around a lot of people. I didn't want you to call me up front and have me talk to the class. So I was like, I don't want to push that on them. But then I began to realize that it's that mindset that kept me where I was at. It was the mindset of, I'll just be quiet and sit in the back row, and I'm still going to believe in God. I'm still going to call him my Savior, and I know that He can heal, but maybe just it's not me, And that mindset, it's very hard for the spirit and the body, and that's when you get a lot of conflict. So a lot of times just talking about it helps, just whatever happens. So a lot of people are probably like, man, that Nathan guy really loves to bring up bad history. But here's the thing, if you don't realize where you came from, if you don't look down on that old life that you used to live, you don't have appreciation for where God's brought you out from. So even though it hurts and it's not fun and it's tearful, at the same time it's pretty good every now and then to be reminded of what was taken from you and what's been given back to you plus. So that is all that I have. I don't want to make any more people cry. I don't want to do any more of that. We really do appreciate each and every one of our listeners. We have 17 subscribers
17.
now.
Yeah.
15 because we can't. Did you subscribe?
Yeah,
so we've got
16,
15
yeah, 15.
because I subscribed. So we've got 15 subscribers. We're just We don't even. We're gonna have to hire another person to answer the fan mail.
I think that's why we have Callista now. So shout out to her
Oh,
for being
yeah,
our
well,
editor and our I guess you can call her our web MD manager, or no, not MD. That's terrible. Our web manager, not our medicine manager. So forgive me for being stupid, but yeah. So again, touching on what you were talking about, yeah, just talking about it not only will get that thorn out, but you know, sharing. My mic keeps falling down. Sorry, guys. Holds, you know, holds them to keep you accountable. So
well, and two, and I won't share because what we talked about is what we talked about at base camp. But whenever we were in our room at base camp and you opened up to me that said, Zach, trust me. And if Zach trusts me, I'm not going to let Zach down. And so I need to be there for Zach whenever he needs help. So to me, you being honest with me and just kind of laying it out there on what was bothering you and what you needed prayer for, a lot of people would have seen that as a weakness. And you were like, we go back to the friends on Snapchat or the group chat. You don't want to seem awkward and you don't want to seem weird. But it was, I think, what helped me and Zach get close as fast as we did was that moment. And I was like, oh, okay, well then I can be straight up and honest with him. And so from that moment on, it's no longer Zach from church. It's Zach, me and Zach.
Right.
So that opening up also, and if your people, if your friends can't receive who you are and what you need prayer to change for, they're not your friends. If they are going to judge you off of that, then I'm sorry, that's not a true friend. And if Zach would have said, "Hey man, this is what I need prayer for," and I would have been like, okay, well, I'm gonna go talk to Clayton real quick. Then where does that leave him? Not only did he open himself up, now he opened up and he's scarred because who he thought he could trust no longer. So it's important that you realize that if you're talking to somebody and they're like, "Ooh, like you need prayer for that? You're not a very good." We got to get rid of it some way. You gonna keep it? You gonna keep what you need prayer for held in? I mean, that's not a good healthy thing to do. And that's what that's another thing that we wanted to portray with this podcast is we're open and honest, transparent. So that's another thing too. I think that aids along with the asking for prayer and the accepting help and opening up and stuff like that. So, ladies, any more comments, or did you already turn your packs off?
I'm good. I don't have anything else to say.
Just be bold. But thanks for having us on.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap this up. Zach, you got any last words of encouragement and or information?
I don't. I think that's pretty much it for this week. Again, thanks for listening. We love you guys. Thanks for believing in us for this venture that we continue to go on and this cool platform that we have now. We can't wait to see you guys tomorrow morning. Service is at 9 and runs until about 10:30-ish, depending on how Rev.
Just say 11. Just say 11. Just
So,
make it 11.
So yeah, roughly 11.
Rev, just change the sign 9 to 11. He's lying to everybody. 10:30. 10:30. He hasn't ended on 10:30 in a year and a half. We just need to change it to 11 o'clock. 9:30 to or 10. No, 9. 10.
10:45.
10:45. We'll go
11.
11:05. Depending on how many coffees he has in him before he comes in. So.
But again, we're excited to see you guys tomorrow. We love you. Thanks for listening and stay blessed.